Shudder is the streaming service with the best selection of horror, thriller, and supernatural movies, series, and originals. From Hollywood favorites and cult classics to original series and critically acclaimed new genre films you won't find anywhere else, streaming uncut and commercial-free right to your favorite devices. Shudder just finished up its halfway to Halloween month, which was the biggest month of original programming in Shudder history, including Season 2 of Creepshow and exclusive movies like The Power, Boys from County Hell, and the 80s horror doc In Search of Darkness Part 2. And the month of May keeps things going with a new original movie every month, including the mind-melting weirdness of Fried Berry, the splattery sci-fi horror comedy Psycho Gorman, and The Reckoning, the latest from the modern horror master Near Marshall, director of The Descent, Dog Soldiers, and episodes of Game of Thrones. You can stream great thrillers, horror, and suspense for $5.99 a month or $56.99 a year. Shudder has the largest, fastest-growing human-curated selection of thrilling and dangerous entertainment. It's called the Netflix of horror for a reason. There are new supernatural terrors, edge-of-your-seat thrillers, and shocking horrors added every week. You'll have unlimited access to stream ad-free on all your favorite devices: iPhone, Apple TV, Roku, Android devices, and many more. Now, I've recently enjoyed Boys from County Hell, and so shall not thou either. It's a little Irish horror flick that I guarantee you'll be squirting some adrenaline from your kidney glands from shock and awe, and I can guarantee some satisfactorious dopamine release as well due to pretty harmless jolly good Irish humor and even more fun Irish dialect. It's a small cast film, rural young kids working in their dad's firm, digging up a field that holds some sinister secrets from the past. What happens next, I won't spoil. Just turn up the volume and dance till you reel in the bait in the bush, 'cause there ain't much trees left over there on the Emerald Island. So don't hesitate. Get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content. To try Shudder free for 30 days and to catch the all-new season of Creepshow, go to shudder.com and use promo code letsread. That's 30 days for free at shudder.com and use promo code letsread. I was born into an Italian family in Newark, New Jersey in the late 1950s. Given the chance, most of us bridge and tunnel crowd will aggressively tell you how The Sopranos is the greatest TV show ever made, myself included. And my favorite ever scene is where Dr. Melfi's family is talking about how Italians get a bad name in this country because of the mob, how there are 20 million hardworking Italian Americans in this country who aren't criminals. Well, my family weren't part of the 20 million. I had more uncles than you could shake a stick at, and spoilers, not a single one was a blood relative. They looked, acted, and talked almost exactly like the guys in that Goodfellas movie. Like, I think that's why it's such a popular movie among guys like that to begin with. They held a mirror up to them. It was sort of authentic. My only problem is that it leans on the glamour a little too hard, instead of giving you the reality. Mobster movies, especially those Scorsese ones, they're sleek and quotable with these killer oldie soundtracks, and they only briefly give you an idea of how violent they can be. From what I gathered over the years, some of the stuff my uncles did was more like out of a horror movie, better scored by the Halloween theme than Gimme Shelter. I only had one little encounter of note, but it's enough that I find it genuinely haunting. This is a story of Uncle Patsy's Labor Day BBQ. So it's Labor Day weekend of 1966. I'm 8 years old and my dad is driving me over to my grandma's house for dinner. He intended to man the grill while my grandma made eggplant parm and the rest of her usual spread. We stop off at the pork store, picking up all kinds of cold cuts and sausage. Only just before we get back in the car, my dad calls one of my uncles on the payphone and had something of an argument with him. My dad wasn't one to raise his voice, but whenever he got particularly angry, he started breathing out of his nostrils real hard, like audibly hard. Since I heard nostrils breathing, I knew it couldn't have been good. But Dad hangs up, turns back to me with a big smile on his face and asks, "Who wants to go see Uncle Patsy?" Oh man, did I want to go see Uncle Patsy? He was one of my favorite uncles, given his magical ability to pull folded up dollar bills from my ear. The man must have had some practice too, because for all the digging I did, I could never seem to find one myself. So, we jump in the car and I think we're on the way to Uncle Patsy's place. Only, we're not. Dad tells me Uncle Patsy has a place out in the country and we're headed there instead. Okay, I think. Makes sense. So I think nothing of it as we drive like an hour out into the sticks and pull up at the pathway to some old hunting lodge looking place. Where we're parked isn't exactly close to the cabin itself, but I can still see the smoke from Uncle Patsy's barbecue trailing up from behind the old place. Instead of getting out to see Uncle Patsy inside, Dad winds the window down and beeps the horn a bunch of times until my uncle appears in the doorway of the cabin and comes walking out towards the car. When he sees me in the passenger seat, he's all, "Hey, oh, how's it going, kid? You got a little something behind your ear, let me get that for you." And boom, I'm $1 richer. So I'm just sitting there happier than a pig in slop while Dad and Uncle Patsy have some nondescript conversation that just went something like, "How's it going with the barbecue? Taking longer than I expected. You heading over to your mom's house?" Julia's over there helping with the Manigo, driving the kid over now. As my dad and uncle are wrapping up their conversation, I started to get a whiff of whatever Uncle Patsy was barbecuing back there, and it smelled great. A little burned maybe, but still pretty good. So from that point, I'm practically salivating over the idea of the big Neapolitan feast I'm about to be diving into. Next thing I know, Dad hits me with a, "Say goodbye to your Uncle Patsy." So I do, and we're back on the road again in a matter of minutes. I remember asking Dad why Uncle Patsy wasn't coming with us, and got a sad feeling that he was being left out of the fun when Dad said that Patsy had work to do. That and the smell of what was cooking made it quite a standout memory from my childhood. But it's one I wouldn't understand the significance of until many years later, and when I did, I'd feel a sense of horror that I'd never felt before and that I haven't felt since. Sometime in my teenage years, Uncle Patsy went to Canada for work for a shipping company there. Only he wasn't in Canada at all. He was in East Jersey State Prison for first-degree murder and kidnapping. From what I heard, someone had taken money from him in some kind of white-collar financial racket. Patsy found out about it, drove the guy out to his cabin in the Barrens, shot him in the head, then tried his best to burn the body. I say tried his best because crematoriums got to get their burners up to a real high temperature to properly incinerate a human corpse. But there's Patsy using little more than a freaking campfire to burn that poor guy to ashes. I heard it took days to get the job done, and even then, he was forced to bury a bunch of charred bones in the woods near the cabin, remains that would eventually be found by a team of forensic investigators. When I heard all this, I was shocked, sure, but not all that surprised. My mid to late 20s had been all about learning the dark truths surrounding my family. It's the timing of the murder that really got me. Because you see, Uncle Patsy had killed and burned this guy around the Labor Day weekend of 1966. So that smell, that kind of smoky, slight charred barbecued meat smell I'd found so enticing, that was a person, or parts of a person, that Patsy had thrown on a fire. In some horrendous childhood-ruining cannibalistic twist, I realized that the smell of human flesh had once made me salivate. And maybe even the worst thing, the guy had only skimmed like $700, pocket change compared to the amount of money that was being siphoned off some nonsensical dental plan they were selling. For less than $1,000, they killed him and disappeared him, for a while anyway. The guy I loved so much as a kid, who I was always excited to see, he was a monster. A violent, greedy psychopath who, along with my dad, exposed me to things that no child should ever be exposed to. It's honestly something I've yet to forgive them for, but since I started going to therapy, I can see myself reaching that level of acceptance in the next couple of years. I mean, I hope so anyway, because there's a reason they call it baggage. It gets incredibly tiring carrying it around. When Tiffany Taylor woke up in the back seat of the car and felt the stranger's hand wrap around her throat, she tried all she could to push him off. But it was only then that she realized in horror that a pair of steel handcuffs had secured her wrists behind her back. Not only that, but what could only be duct tape had been wrapped around her head, almost completely sealing her mouth and nostrils. The stranger held her down, brutally violating her in a way that caused Tiffany to scream, cry, and bite her tongue. The tears which streamed down her face, along with the blood from her bitten tongue, caused the duct tape to loosen slightly, just enough for her to be able to say, "Please don't kill me. I'm pregnant." She didn't expect the man to reply, but what he said in response was more horrifying than she could have possibly imagined. "I know you are," the stranger said. "Don't worry, I've done this before. It'll be over soon. It'll be quick. And when I'm done with you, no one will ever find you." The attack took place during the summer and fall months of 2016, a time when a brutal, merciless serial killer turned inner-city New Jersey into his own personal hunting ground. In the space of just less than 3 months, he attacked 4 different women after using his cell phone to research the most efficient ways to kill and dispose of human corpses. He also used his cell phone to research not only the fastest route to his target, but also alternate routes that cops might not take should they be contacted. He was shrewd, cruel, and calculating, and for a hot minute, all law enforcement could do was hope that their man slipped up somehow and handed them a lucky break. But for 4 women who bore the scars of this man's evil, hope wasn't enough, and patience wouldn't cut it. So incredibly, they hatched a plan to catch one of the most dark-hearted murderers New Jersey has ever seen. Robin West had an awful upbringing. As a result of severe mental illness, she spent a long spell of her youth at Wordsworth Academy, a treatment facility in West Philadelphia for young people with behavioral and mental health issues. It was supposed to be a place where Robin could escape from a dangerous and abusive home life, but the rundown academy and its over-strict, undercaring system proved no better for her. Yet despite such hardship, Robin developed a strong character and an effortless style of charm and humor. It was the style that helped her win clients at the club where she worked as an exotic dancer. But Robin also earned money on the side as a call girl, placing ads on websites which proposed discreet meets in Philly hotels. In August of 2016, one of Robin's friends suggested a trip to Newark, New Jersey, where they would visit a rundown neighborhood where call girls are known to ply their trade. It was a surefire way of making a quick buck when work back in Philly was slow, so the two booked a room at a small motel before heading back to look for potential clients. Then, at around 11 p.m. on August 31st, Robin and her friend headed over to Nye Avenue, a derelict collection of burned-out homes punctuated by overgrown yards and an abandoned train yard. One of the first cars to slow to a crawl alongside them was a silver sedan. Most men tend to be awkward and nervous when interacting with call girls in an illegal setting, but this one seemed polite and charming in comparison. When asked which of the girls he wanted, the driver pointed to Robin, who was wearing a red Nike hat, sultry black shirt, and black shorts with sparkling orange sandals. "Be careful with my sister, because I love her," Robin's friend said, watching as she climbed into the passenger seat. As a precaution, she saved the vehicle's license plate number as a contact in her cell phone, just in case she'd need to contact law enforcement. But the provision did her no good. She'd never see her friend again. As the very next day, Robin's scorched remains would be found in the smoking ruins of an abandoned home in Orange, New Jersey, with one veteran firefighter saying hers were the most charred cadaver he'd ever come across in all his years of service. She was so badly burned that she had to be identified by her dental records, with the day of her death being only 8 days after her 19th birthday. Due to the positioning of the body and the way in which the fire had spread throughout the building, authorities were almost certain of foul play, and with the help of Robin's friend, who provided the suspect's vehicle's license plate, they were almost certain that they could find the killer. Yet a major concern was that he might strike again before being apprehended. If the media got whiff of a serial killer, all chaos would break loose. But the killer would strike again. The only question was, when and who? Born in Augusta, Maine, 33-year-old Joanne Billy Joe Brown was raised in a loving family and was popular among her peers. But after being diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia, she understood why she was so unhappy when she had so few reasons to feel that way. By all accounts, proper diagnoses and treatment enabled Joanne to get a grip on her mental illness, and she showed an admirable amount of positivity and determination in her quest to conquer her condition. But she still felt different from other people. Not apart, just different. She couldn't see herself holding down regular hours or some routine job, instead putting to use her passion for fashion and hairstyling by becoming an exotic dancer. It was through her employment as an exotic dancer that Joanne became an escort. And it was through her escort work that she ended up meeting a man in the parking lot of a Popeyes on Newark's South Side in October of 2016. Several weeks later, on December 5th, a group of construction workers pulled up outside 354 Highland Avenue near Branch Brook Park. The homeowner wanted the property renovated with a view to making it a rental, and had asked the workers to inspect the house before sending him an estimate. A pair of the workers decided to take a look around the first floor, but as they arrived at the landing, they stopped dead in their tracks. One of the men called back down the stairs, telling his boss that it looked like someone was asleep on the dusty wooden floor. But they weren't asleep. It was Joanne Brown, and she was dead. Someone had wrapped her head in duct tape, from her eyes down to her chin, and strangled her with a jacket. The killer's next victim was a young woman named Sarah Butler. A competitive dancer with a passion for ballet, modern, jazz, and African dance, Sarah worked hard to pursue her passion. She worked multiple jobs, eventually saving enough money for a used car. Then, following her high school graduation, she drove the 15 miles to New Jersey City University, becoming the first member of her family to enroll in college. But college life wasn't nearly as social as she imagined, so Sarah found herself creating an account on a social media site known as Tagged, a kind of platonic Tinder with more emphasis on companionship than Netflix and chill, so to speak. It's there that she found the profile of a guy whose username was Little Yacht Rock. Little Yacht Rock also immediately began asking if Sarah wanted to make some money. She wittily responded that she was not into the credit card scams, lol. But Little Yacht Rock assured her he was serious and that he'd pay $500 to sleep with her. $500 was a lot of money to a broke college student like Sarah, and Little Yacht Rock had a very handsome profile picture, but after arranging a meeting that same evening, she changed her mind and stood him up. Yet for some reason 2 days later, Sarah sent Little Yacht Rock the following message. "Sorry about the other day, I got really nervous," Sarah's message read. "I felt terrible, but your voice and your pic don't seem like a match." "I'm a really cool guy when you get to know me," Little Yacht Rock replied. "Let's meet up tonight if you're free." "Sure, but you're not a serial killer, right?" This particular message of Sarah's has a sick resonance to it today. Little Yacht Rock assured her he wasn't, and the couple arranged to meet on the first day of Thanksgiving break. On the day of her date with Little Yacht Rock, Sarah messaged him on Tag to confirm the meeting place. Then that evening, Sarah borrowed her parents' minivan and drove out alone into the clear, windy night to the address she'd been given, 354 Highland Avenue in Orange, New Jersey. The very same house that Joanna Brown had been murdered in just weeks before. When Little Yacht Rock greeted her with a smile and climbed into the minivan, Joanna Brown's cold, dead face was still wrapped in duct tape, and soon, so would Sarah Butler's. When he was done, he dragged her body behind a trailer on the wooded hillside of Eagle Rock Reservation. But on this occasion, he was careless in the disposal, simply covering her body with leaves and twigs with her lifeless limbs sticking out from underneath. Sarah had promised her parents that she would be home by 8 p.m., but when the hour came and went, a close friend of Sarah's became concerned. She began texting around mutual friends to check if any of them had seen her, and as the trickle of replies came in, it became quite clear that something was wrong. The following morning, Sarah's mother, Laverne Butler, called her daughter's cell phone to find it went immediately to voicemail. This was extremely out of character for Sarah, who was famous for carrying her charger on her person wherever she went. A panic rose and Sarah's family hastily contacted the police. 3 days later, on November 25th, a friend of Sarah's happened to spot her mom's blue minivan tucked away behind a derelict factory building. But Sarah was still nowhere to be found. It was obvious that their friend was in danger, and there was only so much the local law enforcement could do to find her. It was with growing frustration that Sarah's friends decided to take matters into their own hands. They drove to the Butler's family home, where Laverne was only too happy to give them access to Sarah's laptop. The friends spent the following few hours searching through Sarah's post history, logging into her various social media profiles, and perusing the message section for any clues to her whereabouts. Obviously, one of these profiles was Sarah's tagged account, and it was there that they found her messages with Little Yacht Rock, paying particular interest to the fact that they'd obviously arranged some kind of meetup, one that was scheduled for the night before she went missing. They saw everything: the offer of cash for intimacy, the man's apparently desperate desire to meet her as soon as possible, and they saw something was hideously wrong. At this point, I think we can all agree that Sarah's friends showed an astonishing amount of character and fortitude when they made a decision to catfish the man who had potentially kidnapped or killed their friend. One of Sarah's friends, Samantha Rivera, created a fake profile untagged using a generic hot girl display picture, then sent Little Yacht Rock's profile a thumbs up. It didn't take long for him to take the bait, and just like with their missing friend, he began offering money if Samantha would sleep with him. The money, the rush, all of it mirrored his text to Butler before she disappeared. Immediately, the women were suspicious. As messages progressed to a call, Rivera pressed a button to place Little Yacht Rock on speakerphone. Thinking on the fly, the friends opened the camera on their own phone and recorded the conversation on video. Little Yacht Rock wanted to meet Samantha, and soon, he was completely unaware of the net that was slowly closing around him. After a prolonged back and forth while the girls stalled for time, Samantha agreed to meet Little Rock Yacht at Panera Bread in Montclair. The location was everything, as it was situated in a strip mall just minutes away from the local police headquarters. Instead of meeting up with Samantha, Little Yacht Rock found himself confronted with 2 homicide detectives sent to intercept him. However, Little Yacht Rock had told Samantha his name was Taj, but the name he was to the detectives was the name on his driver's license, his real name, Khalil Wheeler Weaver. Given that the cops had no way of knowing what Little Yacht Rock looked like, and only had a rough idea of his age and gender, they found themselves unable to take the man into custody, given that he seemed to have a perfectly innocent reason for being at the Panera Bread. They were forced to let him go, but thanks to the net laid out by Samantha Rivera and friends, his time and his luck were running out. 5 days after Sarah Butler's body was found, lying in the weeds near the Eagle Rock Reservation parking lot, Khalil Wheeler Weaver was in police custody. Sarah's friends are the first true heroes in this case, the lead Essex County prosecutor was quoted as saying. He also made it clear that although Khalil Wheeler Weaver left enough of a trail for police to catch him, their efforts might well have been impossible without the amateur investigation conducted by Samantha and company. Without them, a cunning and deadly serial killer might still be walking the streets, and there's no doubt that Khalil would have killed again. He researched ways to kill people using relatively undetectable household items such as bleach and drain cleaner. He plotted ways to murder his victims while remaining almost completely undetected, and using a variety of social media profiles and a plethora of different aliases to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Yet still, he was brought low by the effort of a few concerned and loving friends, along with one more woman, the pregnant Tiffany Taylor. Cut back to her being strangled in the basement of her own car. The man who's about to murder her used many usernames while talking to women online, but his real name was Khalil Wheeler Weaver. Yet just as he was about to finish her off, he remembered something. "Where's your phone?" he asked suddenly. It's back at the Ritz," Tiffany replied, "room 32. As she spoke, she felt his grip around her neck slacken. "Oh no," Khalil replied, a hint of fear entering his voice. "We gotta go back and get that phone." Tiffany knew she'd found a weakness, a piece of evidence he couldn't allow to exist, and as he drove them both back to the motel to retrieve the cell phone, Tiffany was presented with an opportunity to save her own life. As long as she can remember, Tiffany had been double-jointed, and as she sat in the back seat of the car she was now captive in, she folded her left thumb into her palm and silently wrenched one hand free of the cuffs. Her prospective killer neither saw nor suspected a thing. Her plan was to wait until he hit a stoplight, then hook the handcuff chain around his neck from the back seat, strangling him before he had a chance to kill her. There was every chance he would put his foot down and send the vehicle plowing into oncoming traffic at breakneck speeds, but Tiffany already accepted she was going to die if she didn't do something. If she could take her captor with her, so be it. Yet in a stroke of bad luck, the vehicle didn't hit a single red light on its way back to the motel. But as it pulled into the parking lot, Tiffany had another idea. She slipped her hand back into the handcuffs and played the helpless victim for a few more moments to lull her captor into a false sense of security. Khalil opened the back door and tore the duct tape from her face. He then draped a jacket across her shoulders to hide the handcuffs and explained the plan. She was to walk upstairs while he would trail a few feet behind. After she retrieved the phone, they would leave together, and he would find a place to kill her. Tiffany followed the plan to the letter and soon arrived at the mustard yellow door of room 32. But room 32 wasn't empty. Inside was a companion of Tiffany's, one who had a rampant, long-term heroin addiction. Tiffany had promised to return with heroin following her date with Khalil, and the person inside was practically watching the doorknob in anticipation of her return. All Tiffany had to do was kick the door once, and it opened almost instantly. Khalil was under the impression that he'd have to open the door himself and had no time to react to Tiffany as she dived into the motel room. When officers from Elizabeth Police Department responded to Tiffany's 911 call at 9:28 p.m., Khalil was still there, watching police from the shadows. Taylor isn't fond of courthouses, nor is she a fan of law enforcement, but she swallowed her pride to help put a vicious serial killer behind bars. During his trial, she sat in the witness box and faced Khalil, looking him in the eyes despite him refusing to return her gaze. "I wanted him to see me," Taylor said. "I wanted him to know that it was me." Every word of that final statement is true. It was her who helped put him away. The police might have filed the charge against Khalil Wheeler Weaver, but it was Robin West's friend who recorded Wheeler Weaver's license plate. Joanne Brown's friend helped police connect Khalil to the spot where she was kidnapped, along with the abandoned house where her body was found, while Samantha Rivera and her friends established Wheeler Weaver's methodology, using his phone to track women, offering cash, then rushing them to meet. After being pronounced guilty by a jury of his peers, Khalil Wheeler Weaver has yet to be sentenced for his crimes, but it's more than likely he'll receive multiple life sentences along with additional time for kidnapping and other crimes. By finding Wheeler Weaver online and luring him into a trap with police, these women risked their lives. He believed he was hunting his next victim, but in reality, they were the ones hunting him. On August 24th of 1940, Richard Biegenwald's Staten Island upbringing was the stuff of nightmares. his father was a violent alcoholic and beat his son brutally on a daily basis. By the time Richard was just 5 years old, the abuse had gotten so bad that he tried to burn down the family home. Following the dangerous outburst, so rare in one as young as he, Richard was sent for observation at the Rockland County Psychiatric Center. He was released shortly afterward and returned to the guardianship of his parents, but Richard's home life didn't improve any. In fact, it only got worse. By age 8, Richard claimed he was drinking alcohol and gambling, and that his parents chose to deal with his behavioral problems by forcing him to undergo electroshock therapy, a term that is something of an oxymoron. Used as a treatment for major depressive disorders, catatonia, or prolonged mania, side effects of electroshock therapy can include confusion, loss of motor function, and severe memory loss. The long-term memories of those subjected to ECT have been known to suffer dramatically, with famous examples being that of Townes Van Zandt, a legendary country singer who lost most of his childhood memories as a result of the treatment, and it had almost exactly the same effect on Richard. Rare memories of a mostly miserable childhood were now gone forever, and all he was left with was the pain of abuse and abandonment by a family he barely knew. Following the electroconvulsive therapy, Richard's behavior took a sharp turn for the worse. He was moved to the State Training School for Boys in Warwick, New York, an institution designed to curb his darker inclinations before they could take root. Yet none of the treatments prescribed by the teams of highly experienced child psychologists did anything to properly socialize young Richard. He regularly stole from other students, routinely started fights, and instigated multiple escape attempts involving himself and other students. Needless to say, he was a handful, and his behavior remained atrocious even on trips home to his mother's place in Staten Island. He held an incredible amount of resentment for her, and saw his enrollment at the training school as evidence that he was unloved and unwanted. In response, he stole his mother's money, defied her curfews, and at one point, in an attempt to prevent his return to the training school, an 11-year-old Richard set himself on fire with lighter fluid and matches. After recovering from the burns, Richard spent another 5 years at the training school, transferring to high school at 16, but dropping out shortly afterward. Richard then lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a couple of years, but returned to the Northeast in 1958 after a conviction for vehicle theft, whereupon he settled in the state of New Jersey. It's there, in the city of Bayonne, that Richard decided to rob a grocery store of the night of December 18, 1958. It was the week before Christmas, and Richard was broke, but he knew that the local grocery stores would be fat with cash thanks to the marked uptick in holiday sales. He hit one mom-and-pop grocery store with an accomplice known only as Frank, and in order to gain access to the on-site safe, he came face-to-face with the owner and proprietor, Stephen Sladowski, who also happened to be an attorney and public prosecutor. According to witness statements, Sladowski appeared to have made the mistake of assuming he could reason with a man like Richard. He used his experience as an officer of the court to assure the men that if they quit before anyone got hurt, or any money was stolen, they'd receive leniency from a judge who might well take pity on financial hardships during the holiday season. He poked and prodded at Richard's fragile ego until he snapped, putting a bullet in Sladowski's head before he could even open the safe. Richard and his accomplice went on the run, but were picked up a few days later in Maryland. He was extradited back to New Jersey, convicted of murder, and spent the next 17 years of his life in one of the Garden State's maximum security prisons. At his parole hearing, Richard assured the authorities that he was fully rehabilitated. He told the board that he was deeply ashamed that the behavior of his youth had culminated in the murder of an innocent father and public servant, and that he'd spent the last 17 years wishing he could take it back. Satisfied he'd paid his debt to society, Richard was then released from prison, where he worked various odd jobs over the years that followed. He generally kept a low profile, adhering to his parole conditions, and only once missed a meeting with his parole officer. He was arrested in 1980 on suspicion of a serious assault, but when the victim failed to pick him out of a police lineup, he was released without charge. To outside observers, It appeared that Richard was actually changing his ways for the better, and he even managed to find himself a wife, moving into a small Asbury Park home with her shortly afterward. It's here that the Begenwalds befriended their neighbors, who turned out to be the only people with the insight on just how little Richard had changed. At first, the neighbors found Richard to be a quiet and unassuming man. He knew he'd spent some time in prison, but were too polite to ask what the conviction was. To him, Richard was a reformed criminal, one who deserved to be given a second chance. Sure, he had some unusual interests, but otherwise he seemed harmless. But one day, on a visit to the Begenwalds' home, Richard showed one of his neighbors something that took their breath away. The neighbor woman had made fast friends with Richard's wife, and when he asked if she wanted to see something in the garage, she had no reason to suspect it was anything untoward. But after leading her into the garage and pulling back a large sheet, Richard revealed the dead body of a young woman, saying he had gotten her out on the boardwalk at the Jersey Shore. His wife's friend was utterly horrified, but somehow played it cool enough to escape the residence without raising Richard's suspicion before hastily contacting the police. The cops surrounded Richard's house on January 22nd of 1983, where they found him hanging out with an old prison buddy of his, Darren Fitzgerald. Given that he had a history of shootouts with police, they knew there was a good chance he'd opt to die in a firefight than come quietly. So, rather than risk the lives of innocent civilians in the surrounding homes, a police SWAT team came up with a rather cunning plan. A plainclothes police officer essentially faked a collision with Richard's car, then caused enough of a scene outside to cause Richard to step out of his house to investigate. Once he'd stepped off the porch, the SWAT team made their move, tackling the ex-con before taking him into custody. Darren Fitzgerald was also arrested, suspected of being an accomplice in the murders, and in a manner of speaking, he was. But when questioned by police, Darren told them any assistance given to Richard was purely the result of terror and coercion. He had no idea his old jail buddy had taken to killing again, especially not defenseless young women. And if detectives hadn't swooped in to capture him when they did, there's no telling how many more he would have killed. Darren said Richard was stockpiling a variety of conventional and not-so-conventional weaponry that he planned to use in scores of additional murders, and that was backed up by evidence taken from the Begenwalds' home. Officers seized a large cache of weapons and illegal drugs from Richard's residence, which included several pipe bombs, handguns, rifles, shotguns, a machine gun, large amounts of marijuana, and floor plans for several of the area's notable residencies and businesses. Police also made the disturbing discovery of a rohypnol and chloral hydrate stash, two sedatives with memory-erasing side effects. But even more terrifying was the live puff adder that Richard kept in his basement, along with a collection of syringes and venom-collecting equipment. The puff adder probably accounts for more deaths than any other snake in Africa, with an adult having enough venom to kill 5 grown men. It's terrifyingly clear that Richard Begenwald was planning on injecting people with snake venom, a silent and potentially untraceable crime that would be the calm before the pipe bomb and machine gun storm. The people of New Jersey can thank their lucky stars that Richard was caught before he could subject them to such a horrifying and deadly ordeal. During his trial, the media dubbed Richard the Jersey Shore thrill killer, after it came to light that he'd lured a girl off of the Asbury Park boardwalk, shooting her in the head just so he could watch her die. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Richard guilty, recommending a sentence of death by lethal injection. But over the years, Richard was on and off death row as a series of appeals came to a fluctuating set of conclusions as to what his punishment should be. In August 1991, the death sentence was overturned for good, and Richard was locked away in the New Jersey State Prison, never to taste freedom again. Then on March 10th of 2008, Corrections Department spokeswoman confirmed that Richard had died from a combination of both respiratory failure and kidney failure at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. It was a whimpering end to a man whose lifestyle meant that he had been more than likely to go out with a bang. and we all owe a debt of gratitude to the brave neighbor woman who contacted the police, as well as the police officers who took him into custody. The extent of Richard's conventional and biological arsenal of weapons is truly terrifying, and there's no doubt he was planning something that would result in a catastrophic loss of life. And the whole snake venom aspect meant New Jersey was lucky enough to dodge perhaps its most infamous serial killer. One as evil as he was original. A few years back, I was going through something of an existential crisis. You see, I run a fairly small horror review channel, and it's something I really dream of turning into a full-time career. Horror movies and the horror genre in general are the absolute passion of my life, and for reasons I'd rather not go into on a post, being scared can be very, very therapeutic for me. Which is why it was a huge help for me when, one day, I found that nothing really scared me anymore. I say scared, but what I really suppose I mean is spooked, because I was still scared of all the obvious stuff like death, family members dying, etc. What I wanted was a kind of fear of the unknown, the chills you get when you hear a really good ghost story. Maybe wanted is the wrong word. I needed it, and my career might have depended on it. I ended up borrowing my soul to a close friend about it who, after mulling it over, suggested we head up to this old campsite in the New Jersey Pine Barrens we used to frequent in the summer following graduation. We'd share some stolen booze, maybe some cigarettes, tell ghost stories late into the night. Those were legit some of the most fun nights of my life, when each of us would take turns having a mini freak-out to the absolute delight of everyone else around. Since I had a birthday coming up, my friend suggested we turn it into like a birthday thing. We could all drive up on the evening in question, and although it wouldn't get dark until quite late because summer, that really didn't matter to me. I figured being back up there would give me some of that childlike sense of wonder, and maybe that was the key to feeling spooked again. So about a week before, I texted everyone to let them know the meeting time and place, getting back a handful of thumbs-up emojis in response. I thought we were all in for the trip and that everyone would be as psyched as me, but apparently not. When I got to the parking lot we agreed to meet at, there was no one there. In fact, mine was the only car in the entire lot. But still, didn't mean I had been completely forgotten about, right? Maybe the gang had walked up the trail already and were setting up camp. I mean, they would have at least called or texted to cancel or something, right? Right? Again, apparently not, because as I walked the few hundred meters along the trail to the old campsite between the pines, I realize I'm completely and utterly alone. It was probably one of the more heartbreaking moments of my adult life, thinking I'd been totally forgotten about like that. I suppose that people were right when they said that childhood friendships just naturally dissolve over time, even if you do put all the work into nurturing them. Just standing there, looking at the empty campground, it was the purest, guts-themed sad boy moment ever, and it sucked. So, it was with a heavy heart that I began walking back down the trail towards my car. I felt like the king turd of Poop Mountain, and I couldn't believe I'd been stood up like that, on my birthday of all days. I even thought I heard something up the trail at one point, spinning around expecting to see the guys there like, "Hey, we got you." But no, nothing. Just trees and birds. I'm under the impression that I'm so depressed that I'm mentally blueballing myself, imagining things in the trees around me in the hope that maybe, just maybe my friends didn't forget. I even checked my phone, which, granted there was no cell service, but still, no messages or voicemails from buddies. Nothing. Then I'm about a third of the way down the trail when, again, I hear something in the trees behind me. And this time I'm certain I just heard something, and it sounded big. You can get some pretty gnarly black bears up in the Pine Barrens, and if they're hungry enough, a low dopamine jerk like me would almost definitely make for an excellent evening meal. So I legit start getting worried when I turn around and still don't see anything. I've always sucked at anything athletic, so the idea of having to run away from something is seriously like one of my biggest nightmares. As I'm continuing to edge along the trail, my heart is pounding and I'm rubbernecking like crazy so nothing can sneak up on me. But just as I think I'm safe, I see some dark shape moving through the trees about 100 yards away. I just think, bear. My adrenaline starts pumping, only I have absolutely nothing to fight it off with. The best I could do was crack open the packet of pork roll in my backpack, toss it in the bear's direction, then hope it'd go for the easier option. So, I kinda swivel my pack onto my front, fish out the pack of processed meat, then start preparing to toss it in the direction of the bear next time I see it. It only took a few moments before I saw it moving again back in the trees, only this time, it wasn't some dark shape moving low in the ground on all fours. It was on its hind legs, moving much faster and with much more purpose than I was comfortable with. I tossed the pork roll, but as I did, the realization hit me that I wasn't dealing with a black bear. I was dealing with something altogether more sinister and frightening. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Jersey Devil, but given it's pretty much the patron cryptid saint of New Jersey, it's something of a personal favorite. According to the legend, the Jersey Devil was birthed in the very same pine barrens I was on that day. A woman known as Mother Leeds had 12 children, but after getting pregnant for the 13th time, the highly superstitious woman became terrified that the child would be cursed by the devil. The kid comes out normal at first, but slowly but surely it starts to transform, growing hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail. When Mother Leeds couldn't bear the sight of her kid having gone all mutant like that, she sent the kid out into the woods to die. Only it didn't die. The kid didn't ever die, and it became the Jersey Devil, spawn of a witch and the devil himself. Only that was nothing but a dumb story, right? But if it was just a dumb story, why was I completely gripped with fear when I saw something moving through the trees on its hind legs? It had to be a black bear, and if it was circling me, I was definitely in trouble. Having that thought triggered the most intense fight-or-flight reaction I've ever experienced, and flight was most definitely the safest option. So I go tearing it down the trail back towards my car, hoping the bear goes for my pork roll before me when I hear this ear-splitting guttural screech echoing through the trees behind me. It was terrifying, like nothing I'd ever heard before, and if I thought I was running my fastest before, I was dead wrong. I was so scared that I found it in me to beat feet even faster than before, all with the certainty that whatever was back there sure wasn't a bear. By the sounds of it, it was big, much bigger than a bear. I'm just sprinting as fast as I can back towards the parking lot, but like I might have mentioned, I'm just not a great runner. So as much as I'm trying, I can hear this thing's screeches getting closer and closer until it sounds like it's almost level with me in the trees. I'm deadly serious when I say I was so scared I was in actual tears, like this perceived reality where I was about to be ripped apart by the freaking Jersey Devil of all things had set in as hard as concrete. Right when I'm absolutely certain I'm about to lose my life in the worst possible way, all I hear is, "Happy birthday!" But I actually don't stop running. I actually keep going for a couple of seconds until my slow, scared brain is like, "Cryptids don't wish people birthday greetings, dude. Stop running already before we puke." I slow down, turn around, and who was standing there on the trail behind me? All the friends I had arranged to meet out in the Pine Barrens. As it turned out, I wasn't about to be ripped apart by the Jersey Devil. I had the best friends ever. The moment I'd finished complaining to my buddy about not being scared anymore, plans had been set in motion that could not be undone. They decided to give me a birthday present that a guy like me could actually appreciate, the feeling of being effing terrified again. I'll admit, I spent the first minute or two after the reveal saying things like, "I hate you guys, I'm never talking to any of you ever again. I just about soiled my pants back there." But in the end, I saw the funny side too. They even managed to capture some of my reactions on camera and were nice enough to post it in a very private group chat so I wouldn't be totally humiliated by legions of YouTube comment trolls. We ended up having a great time, getting drunk out in the Pine Barrens with a designated driver to cart our butts back to Red Bank. And it's something I don't think I'll ever stop thanking them for, because you can't put a price on helping a horror fan get his spooks back. So I saw yesterday from a few people in the horror community who were showcasing creepy landmarks in their hometowns. I had so much fun reading all of the lore behind these places, and it reminded me of something creepy near my own hometown of Somerville, New Jersey. If you take Liberty Corner Road out past the private school, then turn off onto Mountain Road, you come across this huge oak tree that's far bigger and far older than its brothers and sisters nearby. It's so ancient that only half the limbs of the wizened old thing are actually alive, giving it a half-dead, half-alive zombie tree look that's just inherently creepy and distinctly eye-catching. The old thing is spooky enough on its own, but then you learn all the weird and frightening history the tree has, and you start to understand why the locals call it the Devil's Tree. If you ask most people in town about the Devil's Tree, they'll just give you some vague answer about it being cursed. Others will be a little bit more specific, saying how those who damaged or disrespect the tree have come to a bad end. People have stories of how such and such a person peed on this tree or someone carved their name onto it, only to go on to suffer a breakdown or brush with death as they try to drive away. They claim this is because hundreds of years ago, a farmer had a particularly bad harvest and hung himself from the tree after killing his family so they wouldn't have to starve. Because of that, his tortured soul still lingers around the tree, wreaking revenge on those who would do it harm. One guy in town swore that once he stopped to take a look at that old thing on his drive home from work. When he did, he heard voices behind him talking, but when he turned, there was no one there. He also swore that on his drive back into town, a black Ford pickup began to chase him for a stretch before disappearing down a country road. I don't really believe any of that though, and I think the bad vibes around the tree came from the fact that the Klan used to use the tree for lynchings back when they were still a thing around here. Apparently those idiots killed quite a few people too, and always left them hanging from the tree. So maybe parents told their kids to stay away so they wouldn't see the bodies or whatever. Either way, I'm not sure why the town council don't just have it cut down. Because this is the other thing that kind of creeps me out about the Devil's Tree. There's also a rumor that if the tree ever dies or gets serious damage, that a terrible fate will befall Somerville. Now, it's probably just the town wanting to preserve it for historical reasons, but they actually put a chain-link fence around the old thing to protect it from vandals. And every time someone proposes cutting it down, the town planner rejects the idea without so much as entertaining it. It doesn't matter the reason. New homes, a strip mall, a park, every single idea from 1979 to 2007 has been shot down on sight. Like, what are they even protecting? People were lynched from that tree, just cut it down, I think to myself. There's one final clue that I feel might help us solve the mystery of the Devil's Tree: the heat rock. In winter, the ground beneath the tree stays free from snow, no matter how much has fallen or how recently. On top of that, there's this old boulder close to the tree called the heat rock, which stays weirdly warm like all year round, even when it's freezing outside. It's the same with the tree sometimes, and I can testify to this too. Even when it's snowing or whatever, the Devil's Tree stays just a little warmer than everything around it. I've heard a lot of nonsense about how there's like a portal to hell underneath the tree, but I'm thinking the real explanation is like a thermal vent or something. But in that case, how far down does it go? And would cutting down the Devil's Tree and tearing up its roots, would that do something bad with the land? Poison it maybe, or something more catastrophically destructive? I'm definitely not a geologist, but maybe someone in the comments knows a little bit more about that sort of stuff and can enlighten me on it. Anyways, I found the more I learned about the Devil's Tree, the creepier it got. It went from a local curiosity to something I find genuinely a little frightening. Like I said, I don't believe in ghosts or any of that paranormal stuff, but there's enough mystery surrounding the Devil's Tree for it to definitely top my list of creepy local attractions. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.